Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Saturday everybody. I hope you're enjoying your weekend. Like we normally do on a Saturday episode, we dive into a topic which sometimes we do not have the time to do deep analysis of during the regular weekly episodes. These sort of episodes are more for the core subscriber base that do enjoy a bit of a deeper dive. So that is what we'll do today, for the first half of the episode at least, by looking at ideology, a topic that some may find dry or even irrelevant, but I believe following ideology-related developments is critical to understanding elite and popular worldviews, national policy, and political decision-making. Today, we examine two flagship ideology projects of Xi Jinping thought. The first is Xi's so-called Chinese-style modernization. In the latest issue of Jiushi, the top party publication leads with a short excerpt of a speech Xi Jinping gave in February, the opening of a study session at the party school of the Central Committee on Chinese Modernization. The speech, titled Chinese-style modernization is socialist modernization led by the Communist Party of China, expresses, quote, only by unswervingly upholding the leadership of the party can Chinese modernization have a promising future, or else it will deviate from its course, lose its soul, or even face catastrophic mistakes. End quote. Of course, this is an old and familiar theme. However, the speech also includes a more recent familiar theme, one which we have seen creep into much of Xi Jinping thought in recent years. This is the idea of the superiority of Chinese modernization over westernization or Western modernization, and as such an alternative, not just for China, but for the world. Put another way, the express articulation of an ideological competitor to the West. Quote, Xi said Chinese modernization is a new model for human advancement, and it dispels the myth that modernization is equal to westernization, presents another picture of modernization, expands the channels for developing countries to achieve modernization, and provides a Chinese solution to aid the exploration of a better social system for humanity. End quote. If this doesn't already remind older viewers of Soviet statements during the Cold War, the next part should. Quote, he also said, we should not only create higher efficiency than capitalism, but also more effectively safeguard social equity, so that efficiency and equity can better balance, promote, and unify each other. End quote. The themes don't just stop with Marxism, however. Another critical and potent ingredient remains: nationalism. Quote, Xi Jinping pointed out Chinese modernization is deeply rooted in the fine traditional Chinese culture. We must keep to the origin, root, and spirit of Chinese modernization, unswervingly adhere to the Chinese characteristics, essential requirements, and major principles of Chinese modernization, and ensure the right direction of Chinese modernization. We must uphold independence and self-reliance, place the development of the country and the nation at the basic point of our own strength. End quote. On this theme, we move to the second ideological project of Xi Jinping thought we need to cover today. Last week, General Secretary Xi Jinping also spoke on Chinese civilization at a special cultural symposium held by the Chinese Academy of History in Beijing. The Chinese Academy of History sparked some controversy last year after the institute published a special report arguing that China's isolation from the 16th through the 19th century was actually a good thing. It was believed that the position was produced to justify the then strict zero-COVID policy. The paper was widely criticized by Chinese academics, who argued that the closed-door and inward-facing policies of the late Ming and Qing dynasties was largely detrimental to China's development. According to the official readout, Xi expressed at the event, quote, Chinese civilization is characterized by strong uniformity, which is why different ethnic cultures of the Chinese nation are integrated and can rally close together even when faced with major setbacks. It determines the common belief that the homeland cannot be divided, the country cannot be destabilized, The ethnic groups cannot be separated, and the civilization cannot be disrupted. It also determines that national unification always stays at the heart of China's core interests, and a strong and unified country is the pillar upon which the well-being of all Chinese people depends." End quote. The General Secretary then trumpeted China's 5,000 years of uninterrupted civilizational continuity, meaning that China can forge its own path without the need for Western influence, but then added, without a hint of irony it seems, that this fine traditional culture should, quote, "integrate with the basic tenets of Marxism." End quote. Next up, we turn to the economy, with updates related to gold, German investment, and a massive stock market rout. Hey guys, if you enjoyed today's episode of China Update, don't forget to hit that like button. It's just me making these episodes every day. It's a lot of work, but your guys' support is a huge source of motivation. Subscribing and sharing is a huge help as well, and for those who can go the extra mile and help me keep the channel financially sustainable, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. Thank you so much, everybody, for the ongoing support. Okay, next up, let's move through several salient economic updates. In May, China increased its gold reserves for a 7th straight month, signaling, in the words of one analyst, ongoing strong demand for the precious metal from the world's central banks. According to the People's Bank of China, on Wednesday, Beijing increased its gold holdings by about 16 tons in May, bringing total stockpiles to about 2,092 tons. Of course, China's central bank isn't the only one doing this. Rising geopolitical uncertainty and stubborn global inflation has pushed central banks around the world to buy a record volume of gold last year. But Chinese demand appears especially strong. In Q1 this year, only Singapore was a bigger buyer than China, leading some to speculate that perhaps Beijing is more nervous than most about more future geopolitical instability. Next up, on Thursday, the German Chamber of Commerce in China published results from its latest survey of German businesses operating in China. The results not only give us an idea of how German companies, key players for China, think about the Chinese market, but the findings can also give us an idea of general European business sentiment to some extent. The survey report observes that China's decision to abandon its zero-COVID policy has, quote, not sparked a rebound in German firms' plans to invest there, as a sluggish recovery and geopolitical tensions weigh on the business outlook, end quote. According to the survey of 288 firms conducted last month, some 55% of German companies plan to further invest within the next 2 years, slightly above the 51% recorded in 2022, but well below the more than 70% recorded in 2020 and 2021. Analysts argue that the hesitancy with regards to investment is in part driven by businesses feeling political shifts back home in Berlin and anticipating greater scrutiny of investments, both from the European side as well as from the Chinese themselves. Indeed, in the survey report, the head of the German Chamber of Commerce observes, quote, geopolitics have a profound impact on companies on the ground, prompting them to drive forward localization and diversification strategies as risk management measures, end quote. Nearly a fifth of the companies surveyed have put planned business in China on hold. 1 in 6 are preparing for a worst-case scenario, including complete withdrawal from the Chinese market. And finally, for today's video, after suffering from a painful $1.5 trillion rout in Chinese stocks, institutional banks from Goldman Sachs Group to Morgan Stanley have all slashed their MSCI China Index targets, indicating a less optimistic consensus towards Chinese equities. Disappointment appears to be the sentiment du jour. Quote, on the index level, we frankly think the Chinese market may tread water, grow a little bit in the second half, but probably not offer that much. The post-zero COVID performance has been more limited than people had anticipated. End quote. From November through January, battered stock prices had seen some recovery, climbing 60%. Major banks at the time expected this trend to continue into 2023 as the country began reopening. However, as US financial media outlet Bloomberg writes, latest projections from major Wall Street banks suggest that while the gauge may rebound from current levels, quote, it will struggle to reclaim the high seen in January when the reopening frenzy was at its peak, end quote. Even when the gains started to fizzle out, the outlet explains, few expected the downturn to be this prolonged and steep. Quote, the gauge has lost close to 20% from its January 27 peak, shedding about $1.5 trillion at the depth of the rout. The Hang Seng China Enterprises Index has also tumbled into a bear market, while the CSI 300 benchmark for mainland shares has erased all its gains for the year, end quote. End quote. Despite this, however, some investors do remain optimistic. Quote, I would expect to see some better second half of the year. From a strategy perspective, we would need a high level of risk premium to be comfortable, but from a technical point of view, we could see some rebound, end quote. We will see. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Have a wonderful Saturday wherever you are. Have a great weekend, a relaxing weekend. And I will see you all back here for more China Update on Monday.